And this Russian thing is going to prove it. At the end of this crisis, perhaps we may not need any other crisis to tell the world that the 21st century, guns and bullets are useless. They mean nothing.
If we import more, import more than 20 billion US dollars, and we export 10 billion, the deficit itself, 8 billion, tells you that a lot needs to be done. I don't know what happened in the second time we were told of the Big Four agenda on manufacturing, but it has not been a dream which has come into fruition. But I think in the next maybe administration, that is what they need to look at and bridge that gap.
As to whether or not we should get out of Somalia, I've always maintained that I don't see what we are doing in Somalia.
Peacekeeping.
It to me doesn't make sense. Because first of all, there's the cardinal principle that a neighboring country cannot be part of a peacekeeping mission. So we are breaking that already. That there's Kenyans and Somalis are brothers and sisters. These boundaries are artificial, borders, they're artificial. I mean, a Kenyan and a Somali, these are just same people. We cannot fight over what God has given us. God has given us huge coastline with deposits of oil and gas and fish and other marine resources. We can't even finish, even if we tried for 200 years.
Following Russia, Ukraine's ugly spat, what critical lessons lie in store for Kenya with regards to economic security and stability? Well, that forms the basis of our conversation here today on Business Glide. As always, I'm yours truly, Richard Mwenja, and today we do it a little bit different. We are privileged to have none other than fellow business journalist Clifford Ndumbi on set, and renowned public scholar and Kenya's most sought after political analyst, none other than Herman Manyora. Glad to see you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Prof is just nodding. Are you trying to play the humble
Thank you,
hand?
thank you.
Because Clifford is on board.
Thank you, Richard.
All right. There has been more sanctions coming from the side of Russia, and global supply chains have been disrupted. For Kenya as a young democracy and a young economy, does it speak to an issue of us going forward into a world where we are self-reliant, so that whenever there are other shocks from aside, we can really maneuver around? Let me have your thoughts over the issue of self-reliance and just curbing external shocks, like the case of Russia-Ukraine.
We live in a world that is so interlinked and interrelated that there's no amount of preparedness that you can engage in as a country and to say that you can be self-reliant when there are challenges and other calamities affecting the world. Nevertheless, it is important to try as much as possible to have the capacity to last at least some time. No, you shouldn't be a country you shouldn't be where Kenya is today. If something happened to the oil supply, then all vehicles will stop, because we bring as we consume. Right. So we must get away from that kind of thing. For foodstuffs, for oil and other things that you need to keep moving as a country. You need to move to get yourself to a position where at least if something bad happened, you can last like a year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And to add on what Prof has said, where we are in a globalization kind of economy whereby the entire world is interlinked, and when the geopolitics of the world play in a negative way, then definitely it tends to affect the entire supply chain. You find that in Kenya, we can never be self-reliant, because if you look on what we export versus what we import, there's a very big trade deficit, very big, close to 8 billion US dollars. And that is what we need to bridge as a country. In order to understand this, we need to come up with policies which will now make sure that whatever we import is equivalent to what we export as a country.
All right.
Yes.
Let me have your thoughts on Turkana oil prospects, and if that portends a future where Kenya will be self-reliant on oil, because it's good to know that Russia is the world's second largest producer of oil and number one producer of natural gas. We have the Tula oil project ongoing there in Turkana. What are your thoughts over the issue? Are we likely to go into this direction whereby even if such shocks appear, it doesn't affect local pump supplies?
You know that it is always difficult to understand, but that there are many countries that produce oil but also import oil. America is a big exporter of oil, and a producer of oil, but also a big importer, and so on and so forth. So even if we had proper production in Turkana, Tula oil and the rest, I will still not be sure. I'm not sure that we would get to a point where we can't need oil from outside. I'm not an expert in that field, but I know of many countries that produce huge amounts of oil but still import oil. Nevertheless, it will be a good idea for us to step. And I'm wondering, where is the excitement? We are no longer being treated to any excitement about our oil prospects. I don't know what went wrong.
I see. Mr.
But I should hope that we should actually produce some oil, and if worse go to worse, like we are talking, then we can use our own.
I see.
Yeah.
Mr. Clifford, will you say that Kenya's oil project in Turkana was more of a chase after the winds?
I'm not quite sure about that, but as a country, we need to relook how we did the project and reevaluate where we went wrong, because if we do import close to 90% of, or rather maybe 98% of the oil that we use in Kenya, that tells you that something really needs to be done. We need to maybe have alternative ways of getting our alternative sources of energy. We do have electricity, we do have oil carrier. What more can we do with it that can replace the oil importation that we have? I think it is one thing that we need to look as a country, and maybe the government needs to look at it in that perspective, because right now we are talking about maybe if today the government decides that we are not going to import oil from UAE, what alternative are we going to have? Is it the US? Is it Russia? Is it Ukraine, or whichever other part? Now, in the event there's shortage of oil supply in the world, can we use electricity? That could be another alternative.
I think I agree with you, Richard. Countries are trying to cut dependence on oil significantly, by way of looking at renewable energies, by way of the new cars they are manufacturing,
Cable cars,
electric cars, cars that will depend on solar and so on and so forth, battery charging. I think we should move in that direction. We should have a target as a country. Let's reduce our use of oil by, say, progressive 10%, 20%, so that in the next like 30, 40 years, we depend on oil maybe at 40, 50%. And you can see the manufacturing of cars across the world is moving in that direction. So we must also tap into what's going on in the world and the target to reduce our dependence on oil, fossil oil, as we move forward.
And to add on what Prof has said is that as maybe he looks towards the manufacturing of vehicles, in Kenya we recently started making our own vehicles. I think it's time even they start thinking of how can we now produce electric cars in Kenya. Yes.
All right. The International Court of Justice made a ruling over the Somalia-Kenya dispute over the rich oil and gas territorial waters. You saw the ruling wasn't in favor of Kenya, and President Uhuru Kenyatta said he will not cede even an inch of the Kenyan soil to Somalia. Don't you see this poses a potential threat of probably a possible invasion from the side of Kenya to Somalia in the near future? Or how do you see that playing out in the near future?
I maintain it, and I've maintained it, and I'll continue to, that these Kenyans and Somalis are brothers and sisters. These boundaries are artificial, borders, they're artificial. I mean, a Kenyan and a Somali, these are just same people. We cannot fight over what God has given us. God has given us huge coastline with deposits of oil and gas and fish and other marine resources. We can't even finish, even if we tried for 200 years. Kenya and Uganda cannot, Kenya and Tanzania cannot exploit fully the resources. Why are we being made by foreigners to look stupid and fight over that which God has given us for free?
All right.
So I believe this artificial differences between Somalia and Kenya should be done away with. If there is need to exploit resources, let's exploit them together, but not fight over them. And I don't think that International Court of Justice has much weight, and I don't think it can be allowed to bring countries into conflict.
All right. The reason I'm asking this question, Mr. Clifford, is because there are already calls for Kenya to repatriate its troops from Somalia, the KDF troops under AMISOM. So us being in an ugly spot with Somalia was more of adding salt on the wound. Don't you see now this is probably too much for Somalia to take in? Some quarters are already saying get away with KDF from our land. Now we are under an entanglement over the oil and gas issue.
I'm not a security expert per se, but what I know is that if we decide to get the KDF out of Somalia, that would be like shooting ourselves on the foot, because we know the kind of threat that they will be posing to the country. But then when you talk about the oil deposits in Indian Ocean and the ruling that was made by the ICJ, I tend to think and see it in a way that justice was never served, maybe in the right way, but they had their own reasons as to why they gave the judgment. These are colonial boundaries that we are talking about that should not be moved an inch more or less. If we decide to go that route of maybe withdrawing the soldiers there, then it means we also have to engage Somalia in a military way when it comes to defending the boundary. And that is not the way I think we should be going. The two countries need to come together and maybe have a way and an agreement on how exactly they can exploit and share the profits from the natural resources.
You'll agree with me that any economy will only thrive if it's protected from external aggression, and also its security infrastructure is quite bolstered, you know? Does that speak to the issue of probably us also strengthening the capabilities of our security forces, say KDF, in terms of firepower, so that, you know, Russia will put on all the sanctions and you cannot get into Russia because of its firepower. They have heavy muscles when it comes to such. Is it high time that probably resource-wise we invest more into our security forces with regards to their capabilities? Herman Manyora.
I believe in a world without unnecessary aggressions. I am not one to subscribe to militarization by any country. I don't see what's the purpose it serves. However, I'm not blind to the fact that there will be need to protect your borders from time to time. So to that extent, therefore, there will be nothing wrong with us increasing our firepower. As to whether or not we should get out of Somalia, I've always maintained that I don't see what we are doing in Somalia. I don't see. To me, it doesn't make sense. Because first of all, there's the cardinal principle that a neighboring country cannot be part of a peacekeeping mission. So we are breaking that already. We are not supposed to be in Somalia. Secondly, the feeling within the country, in that country, is that we have overstayed our welcome. So I believe we should get out of Somalia and mind our own business, protect our own borders. If Somalia becomes aggressive, we deal with it as an aggressor, militarily, if politics has failed. Yeah, but since we are brothers, I don't see it getting to that level. How would Kenya ever fight with Somalia? You know how many Somalians are in Kenya?
Hundreds of thousands.
So, millions, not hundreds of thousands, millions of Somalis. What are you talking about? We are the same people. We cannot come to a point where we can fight. But being in Somalia, I don't know what we are doing there.
All right.
Sincerely, I don't know, maybe we are not experts. And those the decision that informed us going to Somalia and then staying there, maybe we are not aware. So we cannot be talking as laymen. But if I were to be asked, we should have left Somalia long time ago and minded our business, protect our borders, help our Somali brothers, because we are the ones who have been putting them up to form the civilian government, to bring back democracy to their country. We help them more, and where they need our security forces to train their people, to guide them, that we can do.
Mr. Clifford, in as much as Kenya has to hope for the best, it also has to prepare for the worst. Would you say, perhaps from the context of Africa as a continent, is it high time probably we come with our own, say, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, so that probably, you never know, in the future, such aggressions might come on board, and we need to have a body that we know we can believe in ourselves and our firepower is well enough to address such?
I'm not really quite sure that can happen right now, because we do have the AMISOM in place, which is tasked with ensuring maybe they do the peacekeeping missions whenever there's a problem within the boundaries of continent Africa.
And for only member states?
Yes, for member states. But what I need to, or rather I would say we need to do, is to ensure that we get the first world technology on our hands in case of any aggression and potential threat that can be posed to the African nations.
Yeah. All right. I see. Prof, what do you have, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think militarization is an option in the 21st century. And this Russian thing is going to prove it. At the end of this crisis, perhaps we may not need any other crisis to tell the world that the 21st century, guns and bullets are useless. They mean nothing. Human beings need to enjoy good life. They need to expand the frontiers of knowledge, to be able to enjoy good living, to be able to mitigate challenges such as those similar those of, for example, COVID-19, because we are going to be facing this kind of things. So the enemy today may be an enemy you can shoot with a gun. Tomorrow's enemies, guns will be helpless and useless. We need knowledge to fight the challenges. This corona is just a tip of the iceberg. The world is changing in such a way, from a scientific point of view, that we are going to have to face bigger coronas than the corona we have faced. We need knowledge. We don't need guns. When there was this crisis of immigration in Europe, European countries discovered you are preparing with the tanks to guard your borders, you have everything, planes, what. Then immigrants are crossing into your country, you are facing a child with a lollipop. You shoot such a kid from Libya. That's where we are headed.
Yeah.
And this Russian crisis, I am sure, is going to tell the world you don't need guns, you don't need tanks, you need knowledge to fight challenges which guns and tanks cannot fight. In any case, if we develop ourselves as a military giant in Africa, we have nuclear capabilities. At what point shall we ever use them? Russia is a standoff with the US. Can the US attack Russia? Would Russia attack the US?
No.
Would they use nuclear weapons? So this should tell mankind that we are past the days of spears, because a gun is just an advanced spear. We need knowledge, not guns.
Yes. All right. The very last. Definitely, you are posted with the issue of the high cost of living experience in Kenya is due to the imported inflation, all thanks to the disruption of global supply chains, thanks to the Russia-Ukraine invasion. Will you say it's high time that Kenya needs to strengthen its local value chain?
Yes, that is what is missing right now. We need to ensure that we have industries that can help the common mwananchi and maybe can get the goods outside there, because if we import more than 20 billion US dollars and we export 10 billion, the deficit itself, 8 billion, tells you that a lot needs to be done. I don't know what happened in the second time we were told of the Big Four agenda on manufacturing, but It has not been a dream which has come into fruition, but I think in the next maybe administration, that is what they need to look at and bridge that gap.
All right, Prof, your stand on strengthening local value chains?
We must, because we talk of unemployment. How can you handle it without working on that, without value addition and so on and so forth, creating employment opportunities through expansion of businesses, through manufacturing, through exports and so on and so forth. We need to do those things to improve the economy and create jobs for our young people.
All right, well, that's where we wrap up our conversation today on Business Glide, touching on matters, critical lessons Kenya can pick from the Russia-Ukraine invasion that touches on our economic setup. For our fan of the week is none other than Timothy Irungu, just across here in Karen.
Timothy Irungu from Karen, thank you for being part of this family. Thank you again, asante sana Irungu.
All right, make sure you get posted on our subsequent editions that come to you every Tuesday and Thursday here at Herman Manyora's channel. My name is Richard Mwenja, always a pleasure having you with us on board. Up next on your screen is the Business Glide African Proverb of the Day.